Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to RATPAC. We did have a session last week, but this is our second session, and we're hoping to keep things running. So again, welcome. And we also just want to make one other quick announcement before I start my presentation. We are also looking for people that are interested in serving as committee members. So if you're interested in being a committee member, if you could go to the RATPAC site, click on the contact information, send Dan an email if you're interested, and we will consider candidates. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So again, see your smiling faces, mute your mics. Good evening, everyone. My name is Anthony Luscre, Kilo 8 Zulu Tango, and tonight's presentation is on interfacing your radio and computer. My contact information, Kilo 8 Zulu Tango 73 at Gmail, and my website, kilo8zulutango.com. This slideshow has a number of links in it, as usual for my presentation, so you'll either need to jot down tiny.cc/radio-2-computer, or you can shoot the QR code with your phone. I'll have that available at the end. And if you need a PDF, you can also download it from here. So that's why you're going to want the slideshow. We will also post this on the RATPAC site. So the purposes for this interfacing. The number one purpose is probably to control radio operations from your computer, and to read the data from the radio to the computer, typically for logging programs. So logging and contesting programs pull that information. So that's two of our purposes. Other purposes include exchanging audio streams, basically sound card interface, which we'll be talking about for things like FT8, FT4, WinLink, etc. The other thing you can do is you can program radio settings. Now this is more common on VHF and UHF radios for programming memories, but you can do some of this on HF also. Programming radio memories in all types of radios, and sometimes cloning a radio settings from one radio to another. Sometimes this doesn't require a computer at all. You can simply do it with the right cable. Sometimes it does require using software. So let's look at some of these in a little more depth. Controlling the radio operations from the computer includes reading the frequency and band, changing modes. This is an example of one piece of software. There's many pieces of software I'm going to be showing tonight, and we're not going to go into a lot of detail on the software. We're going to focus more on the interfacing, but this is WinSuite for K4 or K3, and it's showing my radio, and I can change any of these settings on my HF radio from this link. So the nice thing is if I'm operating remotely, I can log into my computer desktop, see this screen, and I can make any of the changes without having to touch my radio. I can also activate push to talk. I can send specific commands to the radio to tune the antenna tuner, change antennas, hit the spot button, voice keying, change filters, etc. I want to mention real quick about the spot. I'm going to talk about a number of different things tonight, so I don't forget it. On N1MM, if you have a spare macro, on a lot of radios you can set it up so you can send a command to your radio to do the spot command. So if you're operating CW, instead of reaching up to hit the spot button on the radio, or as I think Yaesu calls it, the Z spot or Z menu, you can send a spot from there. We'll talk more about that later. Also, to be able to send CW or FSK or RIDI to the radio from your computer, or the remote control the station completely. Reading the data from the radio to computer is useful for logging and contesting software. We can read the frequency, the mode. We can also, if the radio can decode it on its own, we can read the information from the decoded information in the radio to our screen on the computer, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later also. And I just want to stop on this screen for a minute, because what happened is a number of years ago in the early 1990s, I decided I wanted to be able to connect my computer to my radio so that I could log and not forget to change the frequency in the logbook and not to record the right time. So I went out and learned how to do computers, and it actually changed my whole career. So I switched careers after I learned about computers and went into the computer technology field, basically because I was interested in pulling this information into my log from my computer. We can also use it to exchange audio or data streams between the computer and the radio. So, of course, digital sound card modes such as FT8, FT4, JT65, PSK, RIDI, Packet, Pactor, MFS, K, Olivia, Throb, and about 30 other modes typically known as the digital sound card modes. We are exchanging information through the sound card stream, and we're controlling the radio typically with the cat control, being able to do the push to talk, although we could do that with the Vox and not even have to have cat control. We can also use it to activate memories in the computer. So we can have voice memories, we can synthesize information, etc. We can also feed the audio coming in from the radio to other programs on our computer. So if you want to record audio, you could use something such as Audacity, which is an audio recorder available for a number of platforms. There's also a very neat tool called QSO Recorder. It is set up so it'll sit in the background while you're contesting, and it'll only record when it's hearing things, so it won't record dead air time. So you can actually record your QSO. And if you go out to the site on QSO, that link is, there we go. QSO order, it's like QSO Recorder is what it sounds like. There's links in there that you can actually search for call signs, and you can hear recordings from them of your signal on the air, because people run this in the background. And so I could actually go out and listen to someone that recorded my signal. Let's see, they're all CW, these particular ones. Well, that's very weak. And I forgot to do the sharing right, so let me just change the sharing real quick before I forget. Share the sound. Let me bump up the sound a little bit. It's remarkable these contest stations can hear me when I'm that weak sometimes. Let's see if I'm a little stronger here. So you can use it. You can actually go out and hear other people that have used it, and it's pretty neat. Okay, so that's QSO Recorder. So you can do that with Audio Stream. Also, if you want to run a CW decoder, you can do that with Audio Stream. We're also going to talk about the I2Q stream for actually running SDR software in a moment here. But for audio alone, these are things you can do with it. Here we can take the IQ stream and we can use it to run an SDR program, and we can control a radio from that IQ stream, and we can sample a big portion of the band that we normally wouldn't be able to with just the radio. Once you interface your radio for cat control and sound card capability, you can simply add something like WSJTX. It gives you FT8, FT4, JT65, all of those modes, or you can install another free software, FLDigi, and get another 24 programs that you can operate from that. If you spend a little bit more money though and buy the VAR software based modem, and then you can run all the VAR WinLink, VAR AC, VAR FM. These all can be run after you add that. So everything is free except for this modem software. There is a charge for that. But once you have your computer set up for all these things, it's very easy to swap between them. So if you have your computer set up to run FT8, you can add FLDigi to this evening and operate in the RTTY contest a week from this Saturday and Sunday. You can also use the interface to make changes on the radio settings. Here's a particular one. We can enter the frequency, we can change the VFO, we can turn on and off tone. So this is obviously with VHF and UHF, and we can do those sort of things. We can also use interfacing sometimes to upload firmware to the radio. Now I want to warn you about firmware. It can brick your radio, so you want to do this the right way. Now there's different ways to do it. Some firmware, they have you download it onto a USB, on a SD card or a USB drive and then upload it that way. Other ones use a computer interface. So with my Elecraft, I simply use the Elecraft software that comes with it, and I can upload my information through that utility, so I can upload my firmware. And I won't be able to do it right now because I have my Comm Port tied up for something else. By the way, even if you're using Comm Port sharing software, never try a firmware update when you're sharing your software. Just a warning. So if you are doing firmware updating, download the software from the manufacturer's site, follow the manufacturer's instructions exactly, do not turn off the radio during the process. Now if you are daring, actually we'll come to that in a moment here, I got it in a different spot. You can also program radio memories Chirp is a very common program to use on VHF and UHF radios. You can use it on some HF radios also. I know I can do it on my 991. I can do memory programming with that. You can also on VHF and UHF set things like shift, tone encode, etc. Cloning one radio from another. This varies greatly by manufacturer's model. A lot of these simply you have to hook up a cable between the two and you can transfer it that way. You hold down a few buttons on the radio, so it doesn't actually interface with the computer, it just interfaces between the two radios. And again, that's very specific to your individual radio, so I won't really be talking much more about cloning. And this is the slide that was supposed to be next. That slide got out of order. And that's, if you're adventurous, some smaller manufacturers, open source projects, and experimenters provide highly customized firmware. And an example of this is the True SDX transceiver. They took the QRP Labs radio, they stripped out some of the components, they changed some software and firmware, and they made it into a single sideband radio instead of a CW only radio. The Zygoose X6100 has been a hotbed of testing, including the R1 CBU firmware that allows you to overlay and do a lot of different things that the radio is not capable of with the standard firmware. The Kuisheng UVK5 Model 8, there's a bunch of different firmwares for that, F4HWN, EggZoomer, UV Mod, IJV. They basically let you convert this dual band HT into an HF receiver and a bunch of other things. Again, some of which work, some of which don't, but if you're interested in playing around, this is a great radio to pick up. It's not that expensive, and there's a ton of different software out there to play with the radio. Let's concentrate on VHF and UHF radios specifically here a little bit. Most of the radios, such as a Bofang or something like that, you're programming the memories, you're programming the shift, you're programming the tones, but other than that, you're not doing a lot with the software. You're not using the software to control the radio, you're not sending an audio stream, you're basically just sending information. Typically, you download the programming information, you make changes in it, and then you upload it to the radio. It just saves you some time if you're putting in 20 repeaters into your radio. I would advise you, though, to make sure you know how to program your radio in the field in case you need to change it sometime in the field. Even though these are very helpful, you should really know how to do it both ways. Again, you can also, once you download the information from one radio, that you can upload it to the same type of radio. Not really cloning it, pseudo-cloning it by basically uploading all the memory settings from something like Chirp or other software. Some radios do have, VHF, UHF radios do have some read control. It's not really common, though, for the most part. Now, when you get into VHF and UHF on a multi-mode radio, that's UHF, VHF, and HF, they typically have all the same features for VHF and UHF that they have for HF. And that's what I did this last weekend. I had my Yaesu FT991 here. I had my diamond vertical antenna on the roof, and I played FT8 during the AWL VHF contest. And I did it for about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. I worked 36 stations on 2 meters and 440. I got a distance of 360 miles with my little vertical on top of the roof, the wrong polarization, and not much of an antenna, at about 40 watts. So too bad. The good news is it worked really well. The bad news is that was the last VHF contest for the year. So you're going to have to wait until January. But if you haven't done it before and you have a radio that's capable of single sideband on 2 meters and 440, give FT8 a chance to try during any of the 4 VHF, UHF contests during the year. It's a lot of fun. And if you're a technician, it's a great way to do something different. So how do you do this with the computer? Well, you need some software to do this programming. Now, some companies provide software with their radios, or they sell software for the radios. If they don't, you need to look for another source. And there's two main ones. There's a commercial vendor called RT Systems. They sell software for programming radios, and they also sell interface cables. There's an open source software called Chirp. Chirp doesn't sell anything. It's free. It's a software that supports a lot of radios. If you click on the Chirp link, it'll take you out to the Chirp site, and you can come in here and you can see what radios are supported. You can see all the different information here. for Chirp and how to use it. Some people like Chirp, some people don't like Chirp. It depends on the person. I love it myself. I've used it for a number of years and never had any problems with it. Other people claim that they've had some problems with some particular radio. So again, you need to decide what you're doing. It is updated fairly frequently, so if you are going to use it, I would make sure you have the most recent update. Notice these are updates that have taken place in the last 4 weeks. So it's a frequently updated software. So every time you start it up, I would suggest that you also update it. Programming with HF radio memories, again, most like Chirp and those programs don't work with a lot of HF radios. They're mainly designed for VHF and UHF radios, but there are programs out there. This particular program is from Elecraft. It's free. If you have an Elecraft K3, KX3, K4, etc., they have a frequency memory editor that you can use to edit all the memories on it. Again, we don't worry too much about memories on HF, but it has all the memories so that you can get all the correct 60-meter channels properly. And then I also have it set up so that I can hit one memory. When I go to a band, I hit one memory and it brings me to the bottom of the CW band. I hit another memory and it brings me to the bottom of the phone band. And I hit another menu and it brings me to the FT8 section of the band. So again, these can be very useful, but they're a pain to enter 70 different settings into a radio for memories, and this software does it very easily. So again, check for your particular one. And I have links here. These links take you pretty much to one of the places on the website where you'll find software for these 4 major manufacturers. This is a picture of a program here. If you have a Kenwood TS590 or 590S or 590SG, they have a really nice program that has all the controls for the radio on it. And also, the other thing it does too is if you're using the CW decoder, it will also display the CW in an extra window that you can open up. So when I'm doing demo for kids at schools, I can bring my 590 in, I can have the CW decoder running, and I can have it on the big projector screen so they don't have to look at the 7 digits on the front of the radio. And again, this is free software from Kenwood. Now, ICOM has some software that's available, but you have to pay for it, but they also have some free stuff also. So take a look at your major manufacturer and see what they have available for your particular radio model. There's also third-party programs available. You'll need to do a search. If you have like a Kenwood, put in the model and do a search for it. So if you have an old Yaesu FT857, there's software memory management software for that radio available. And it's free software. So take a look and see what's available for your radio. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the interfacing, because that's the main purpose. We talked about a bunch of things you can do with it. Let's talk about actually doing it. And just like other technologies, technology user interfaces, not all radio interfaces are the same. They've changed over time. They've changed by different manufacturers. So this is an example of user interfaces with technology going back to punch cards, keyboards, mouses, mices, etc., and up. Now, when we start looking at the radio end of things, basically interfacing radios started to take off in the late 80s. And there were some early radios out there. A lot of them used TTL, and you'd have to feed the TTL into a converter and then convert it into RS-232. So on the back of the Yaesu FT757, which is their first radio that you could interface. Actually, on the front of the radio, it says CAT system. So we know it's going to be computer interface. Here's what the port looks like. If you don't remember, it's a 3-pin little Molex plug there. That's the port. So we're not going to hook that up to our computer. We need to hook that up to the FIF232C CAT converter to this plug here, and then it gives you an RS-232 on the other end of it to feed into the computer. Here's something similar from ICOM. ICOM had the CT17, again a TTL level converter to USB, but the neat thing about this is it used the bus where you could have 4 radios attached to it at the same time. Each radio that ICOM has a hex code assigned to it, so you can tell which stream of data is going through on this little interface. A lot of radios required that you had to put an extra board in, even though they might be CAT compatible, computer controllable. You had to put another board in. So here's a board for a TS 940. Here's one for the TS 140. I remember installing the board in my TS 680 that I got years ago. Here's a modern interface. This is a Elecraft K2, but look, it's a 3.5 millimeter plug, and it's a 3-conductor plug. So what they do is they give up some of the control on. It's not a typical RS-232. We don't have some of the controls that we do on other RS-232s, but that's the way they run it. Comes out of there, goes into a USB cable, plugs into the radio, and works just fine. But that's the way it's set up. If you ever ran a Yaesu FT857, 817, etc., these plugs, if you've ever had a solder on the other end of these, or you've bent pins, you know these plugs very well. You'd plug in something like this, and it would have a RS-232 interface you'd plug into your DOS computer, and you could run your 817 just fine with data, but you needed the right cable. It's not just the cable, it has other features in it, and these little pins are delicate. You don't want to force them. Here's the interface for the Zygu 8085, I'm sorry, X5105. You plug it into the radio here, and then it has a data out port, a CAT control port, etc. Here's one that you plugged into the radio, and then it had a TTL converter on here. You had to plug a power supply into it, and then it gave you your jack to plug in. One of the things that none of the manufacturers did was standardize on whether they wanted a female or male connector for this RS-232, and some of them went to 9-pin, and some people used the 40-pin. They weren't the 20-pin. They weren't consistent on that. There was also proprietary things like this. Where do you buy that at? Well, hopefully you have it if you need it. Or you've done what I've done. You take a small disc of wood and you drive pins through it and hope they stay aligned with each other and work that way. Here's something that's still current. This is the way Bofang works. This is a very notorious interface. It will not work when you plug it in. You have to plug it in and push it, and then push it again, and then push it a third time. And after you think you've pushed it all the way through the radio, it will finally work. I don't know why it's so difficult to make contact with this particular configuration, but it is a pain. Here's one for another radio. Use the DIN plug on the back. It looks like it's got about a dozen pins on it, and went to an RS-232. Here's one using a different setup. And here's a mishmash from the RT system site of a number of different cables. Fortunately, this is the most common standard for HF radios now. Simple USB AB printer cable, also known as, and you plug it into USB port in the back. So the early types, there was RS-232, there was also TTL with adapters to convert it. There was also proprietary systems that you had to feed it into a box and then it fed out to your computer. And many radios required the installation of other features. So if you're buying an older radio and you're planning on interfacing it, even if it had the capability, make sure it has the board in it needs to have. I did find a site that's still selling some of these boards. They're about $100 a piece. Now, if you do take any of these older types of interfaces, they ended up with RS-232. So we need to take that RS-232 9-pin jack typically and convert it to USB to use on modern computers. So when you're doing that, choose a high quality adapter cable. You can buy a $3 USB to RS-232 cable, and then you can throw it in the trash a few weeks later when you finally decide that you're frustrated enough to get rid of it. If it's not about $10 to $12, you're probably getting a garbage cable. Just the standard. I suggest you go with ones with FTDI chips as opposed to prolific chips. Not because prolific's bad, but there's so many counterfeit prolifics out there that you have a good chance of getting a counterfeit as opposed to a real one. These CH340 drivers are a real pain in the neck. Your computer will yell at you and scream at you. So I actually have a laptop set up that I just have this driver on, and I don't have the Windows drivers on it for other things. So if I have to use it, I can use that particular cable, even though it's obviously doesn't have the special drivers that it should on it. Choose cables with ferrite noise suppression interfaces, noise interface suppressors, or go out and buy a nice toroid coil and wrap it around the cable, and you'll even get a better job. Now, recent types have used that AB cable, but you're starting to see on some of the radios USB-C, micro USB, and mini USB. And I've had a problem over the last couple of years with stuff that has micro and mini USB as opposed to USB B and A and C, in that a lot of times they're surface mounted, soldered onto the board, and when you press on them, they don't have the physical strength to not get knocked off the board. So I've knocked them off a couple things, and it's a royal pain because you basically ruined a device. So yes. We're also starting to get some Bluetooth capability. I think probably the first radio that really was focused on Bluetooth was the ICOM 705, but there's a lot of HTs that are coming out now with Bluetooth interface capability. So you're going to see probably the standard for most laptops switching to Bluetooth in the next couple of years for programming purposes and avoiding the cables altogether. There's also network protocols available on some radios. I even have an old Tentec here that has an RJ45 jack on the back to do network capability to make it remotable that way. So that's been around for a while. But using these network protocols to move information sometimes allows us to not have to worry about COM ports and other things like that. I'm not going to dig that deep in that. But I do want to interrupt for extra geekiness. If you've never read anything from N6TV Bob, he has a great thing called Everything You Need to Know About USB and Serial Interfaces. When you click on this, it'll take you out to a link for a presentation he did at Contest University. Also, on the next page, I have a link that takes you out to USB and serial video he did and another video on station automation. These are really, I would suggest that if you do nothing else, watch this USB and serial video. It is very, very important.
The opposite of any work platform we tried in the past. We tried other work management platforms, not naming names.
For example,
hopefully this will tell you.
For example, if your radio, if you turn on your computer and your radio transmits when your computer boots for a split second, that's because there's a setting you need to turn off in your serial port that you haven't turned off. And Bob will tell you how to do that in this video. So I strongly recommend both the presentation and the video. Now back to our regularly scheduled programming. Okay, so let's go through configuring a typical COM port connection. First, don't connect any cables. Before you connect any cables, look at your manual, go to the manufacturer's website, and find out whether you have to install drivers and whether you have to install them first. Actually, even if they don't tell you to install them first, if you have to install drivers, install them first before you connect the cables. You will save yourself endless hours of headache by waiting to connect the cables until the drivers are installed. So, number one, make sure the drivers are installed before connecting any cables between the radio and the computer. Make sure you download the drivers from an official site, that they're safe, they're not shady drivers. I would go right to the manufacturer's site, look up your radio, and make sure you get the drivers from there. Now, if you have a Yaesu driver for the 710, it will work with the DX10, and it'll work with couple other Yaesu radios because sometimes the drivers are the same. But I don't trust that, so I make sure that I always install the drivers for every new radio I have before I put a cable between the two. If you haven't listened to this, you need to go back and watch Bob's video on how to remove COM ports. Because what happens when you pull the cable out of the back of the radio or out of the back of the computer and you look at your device manager? That COM port you just created that isn't working is still there. It's just not active. So you need to know how to view all the COM ports that have been installed, including the ones that aren't active, and how to delete them and get rid of them. Hopefully you won't do that because you're going to wait before you connect the cable. So typically the drivers are zip files, so you might need to unzip them first, follow the instructions from the manufacturer on how to install them. You will need to make some changes on the radio. So once you do those drivers and you connect the cable to the computer, you're still going to need to make some changes on the radio. Some radios only have one setting, other radios have more than one setting. Some radios you can set the baud rate, or they have a preset baud rate. We need to know what it is. Some radios, not only can you change the baud rate, but you might also need to turn on and off the outgoing data from that port. So just be aware that some radios actually not only can you change the baud rate, but you can actually shut the port off. And again, you'll be extremely frustrated if the port's not on. You're going to need to check the manual to find out two other pieces of information, and that's stop bits and parity settings. Now, fortunately, there's also a lot of websites that cover this information for particular radios. So once you've done all that, connect the USB cable to the radio and computer, and then power on the radio. Typically, the computer will make a beeping sound of some sort. By the way, don't have your speaker muted because you want to hear that little beeping sound, because that's a good sound. That tells you that it's found the cable and it's installing the driver. It may take up to 5 minutes. Typically, it's only a few seconds, but it may take up to 5 minutes sometimes for drivers to be recognized by the computer. Hopefully, you'll get a little message. Sometimes you won't, but you might get a little message that a new driver's been installed. Hopefully, you won't get a message that the driver was unable to be installed. Again, go back to Bob's video if that's the case. We're going to hope that your drivers did install, but you might end up with something like this when you look. Unknown USB port reset failed, or other messages. You'll see a little warning sign on it. So how do you find this information? So you need to open up, we're going to talk about Windows now. We're not going to be talking about Mac. We're not going to be talking about Linux. We're going to be talking about Windows here, just because it's the most common. But you need to use the device manager to find out which COM port it installed, which COM port number was assigned to the COM port for that radio. So write down the port numbers. Now, most of the new drivers, like if you're installing it, if you have an ICOM 705, a 9700, a Yaesu FT10, FT1, 710, they're going to install two COM ports when you connect it. It's going to have an enhanced and a regular COM port. There's going to be two numbers. Typically, the numbers are next to each other, but they aren't always. But typically, they're going to be like 4 and 5, 5 and 6, 6 and 7, something like that. And typically, one is the enhanced driver, and one is the port, and one is the regular port. But you need to know that. And some software is going to want one port, and some is going to want others. But at least now you know it's going to be two, so you're not fishing for 30 different numbers. Again, if you've not read Bob's thing, now's the time to do it. So once you have that information, then you're ready to set up your software program. So let's say you're setting up a logging software. Let's say you're setting up N3FJP, or you're setting up a contesting software like N1MM. You'll need to know that information. So let me just show you what I'm talking about. We open up our program here. We're going to open up N1MM. It's a contest logging software, and there's a video on this at the RATPAC site. You can go through the video that I did on this last year on setting up N1MM. You need to go into the configure and configure ports. Now, the other thing you want to do too, while we're waiting for this to start up, is you want to identify the person that's at your local club that's the computer setup person, support person. I happen to be it for my club. I already support about 100 people, so you got to find your other local support person for when you have problems. But so what I would do is I would go in here and I'd choose the radio I have, and I'd put the COM port, and here's all the COM ports that are available. How do I know which one it is? Because I looked before in Device Manager and saw which two COM ports were installed. How do I know if I have this many COM ports? How do I know which is the new one? Well, you can always go back and do the opposite of what you just did. Open the Device Manager, unplug that USB cable from the computer, and two COM ports are going to go away. Those are the two that when you plug it back in, you'll see reappear. So you might want to take, before you even put the cable in, shoot a picture of your Device Manager. Here's what Device Manager looks like. This is a trick I tell people that are really scared of this sort of thing. Go into your Device Manager, go under COM ports, and take a picture of this. And then when you install the new one, go back and look at it again, and you'll see which of the new ports. Now, why do I have so many ports over here versus only 5 ports over here? because these ports have been created and numbered by different radios I plugged in. Right now I only have one radio plugged in. If I plug another radio in, watch what happens. I actually magically have a cable here. I'm going to plug in another radio into my computer. I've installed the drivers already. I'm going to turn the computer on, and you should magically see. Got to turn the power supply on too. There we go. It's refreshing. Actually, there was one more port. Get the second one. Come on. Second port, you can do it. Actually, there's number 7. I think this radio puts 2 COM ports in, but I'm not sure. But okay, it's on number 7. So this is my Kenwood 590 SG that I just plugged in. So there's our new COM port. So all these COM ports you're seeing over here because I have multiple COM ports. And this is only showing me the active COM ports. If I want to view the ones that are hidden, I need to go up here and say show hidden devices. And there we go. Now you see how many COM ports I really have. And that's the ones that you might have to delete if you make the mistake of connecting accidentally before you have the drivers installed. But we're not going to do that because we're always going to wait to connect the drivers. I'm going to turn this radio off so that power supply doesn't hum in the background. Okay, so back to this. This particular radio I want to install is my Elecraft K3, and it's on COM 14, so I have it set up right there. I click this little set button, and this is where I tell it the rest of the information. I tell it the baud rate, the parity, the data bits, and the stop bits. Almost all the modern radios use 8 data bits. Almost all of them use no parity. The stop bits will vary from 1, 1.5 to 2.5 on different radios. Just find out what your particular radio should be and set that. Now, N1MM is nice enough to suggest what it's going to be right down here beforehand. Now the baud rate is 38,400. I can change the baud rate on that radio. And if I change it, that's fine. I just need to change it here. So it doesn't matter what the baud rate is as long as I know what the radio is set at. And see, it says it's typically between 19,200 and 3,800, 38,400. And I have mine set at 38,400. There's also DTR in RTS. These were used for controlling different things, and they're not used in a lot of the USB interface situations. So in this particular one, on the K3, they're both turned off. I'm going to show you an example a little bit later when one is turned on for one specific type of radio, but we're not going to worry about that right now. So that would be all I need to do. Once I say OK here, you should see my radio frequency show up right here. Come on. And right there, you can see at the top of this band map, it says 14045, and I'm going to tune the radio and watch what happens. That's a good sign. So if the radio is tuning, everything is good. If it comes up and it says 14.000 and you tune the radio and it doesn't move, that means it didn't find the right set of settings, or there's something wrong with the COM port, or something else is going on. So that's would be something we'd have to figure out. We're going to stop right now and we're going to go through the rest of this process, and then we'll talk about solving problems. So we have to choose the radio model, we have to set the baud rate, we have to set the stop bits, the parity, etc. It may ask you for information on DTR and RTS status. You need to set it for different things depending on how your device is set up. So that's how it should work. And hopefully it did work. And most of the time it does work. The problem is when you experiment a lot and have multiple radios like I do and change radios all the time and do things like that. But if you have one radio and you install the interface, the driver software properly, and you don't have other weird devices connected to your computer, it'll go very smoothly and everything should go well. The problem occurs when you choose the wrong COM port. Why do you choose the wrong COM port? Because I have many devices I'm using, or maybe you have something else connected to your computer. You get COM port conflicts if you have multiple devices. You also can get COM port conflicts if you try and use 2 pieces of software with the same COM port. They don't like it. they each want to have exclusive use of the COM port. Other problems, the COM port number can be changed if you use a different USB port. So on that laptop, you might have 3 USB ports, and if you plug it into a different spot when you get out in the field, you're all set up. You tested everything before you left to do your POTA setup. You get out the POTA, you plug it in, and the stupid N1MM is not reading right. Well, what happened? You plugged it into the wrong one. So that's where I stick a little label on it when I'm setting up for a field day and things like that, where other people are possibly going to touch my radio or my computer. I mark, this is USB that goes to the radio. This is where port you have to plug it in on the laptop. Unfortunately, sometimes Windows updates change system settings. Now, they don't typically change COM port settings. They're more of a problem with sound card settings, but I have seen them change COM port settings also. Some other problems, the drivers were not installed, you used the wrong drivers, or they were outdated. If you updated the firmware on the computer, it might require new drivers. I mean, on the radio, it might require new drivers. Incorrect communications parameters. If you set the baud rate wrong on the radio or the software, it won't work right. Stop bits are wrong, parity bits are wrong, etc. Can be problems. Another problem is bad cables. Cheap cables, broken cables, corroded cables. I had a very good cable that was acting very, very weird, and I finally crawled behind the computer and unplugged it and put another cable and never had the problem. And I looked at it closely with a magnifying glass, and there was a corroded pin on it. I don't know why, but there was one pin that just wasn't plated the rest of the way, and it was just giving me trouble. You can also fry the controller in the cable. Counterfeit or fake USB cables. Not having the radio turned on before starting a software problem can cause major problems. So again, once you get everything set up, before you ever use a piece of software, make sure that the USB cable is still connected between the radio and the computer, and the radio is turned on. Then start the software. Because WSJTX has this bad habit, if the port that it's looking for is not there, of grabbing another port or grabbing another sound card device or something else, and you don't want it to do that. Now, this is the really bad COM port problems page. If you're here, you say a little prayer, you send the radio off for repairs, you don't want to get here. That's when you have a damaged port on the radio. Much better to have a damaged cable than a damaged port. Here's an example. This is exactly like the port looks on my used car that I bought recently. Someone shoved their USB drive in there and totally mangled all the pins, of course, in a part that's very hard to get to on the car, and I wish I could play my USB songs, but I can't. On the back of your radio, this is even worse. The other problem I talked about before, these micro and mini USB connectors getting knocked off on the surface mount. They get pushed and they get knocked loose. Also, you can have electrical damage due to surges. Now, some radio COM ports are much more susceptible to this, and the TS590 is notorious as being one of the most sensitive. So I would suggest if you have a TS590, you buy a small USB isolator to help protect from surges, and it's about a $10 or $12 investment, and you might want to get it for any radio that you're doing that with. But the other nice thing about it is if you have a surge protector, you can leave the surge protector plugged into the back of the radio and only unplug the cable from the surge protector. So if you damage the pins on the surge protector, you don't care. But to damage the pins on the back of the radio, or you blow out the USB drivers, a USB port, you're going to have a bill. Okay, questions before I go on? I know I surprised y'all with this, but if you have any questions right now and that you'd like to ask before I move on about COM ports, I'd be happy to try and answer them. I won't just tell you to go watch Bill's video. No questions so far? I see there's some things in chat, but not really questions. Okay. If you have questions, we'll stop for questions a little bit later again. So let's talk about sound card interfacing. There's really 4 different types of radios. Radios with built-in sound cards. Make it very easy. You typically hook up the same USB cable you do for the CAT connection, and your sound card is ready to go. Some radios have an interface with a built-in sound card that you need to do. I'm sorry, you need to use an interface with a built-in sound card, like a Signal Link or one of the other commercial things you plug into a radio that doesn't have a sound card in the radio. You might also need an interface without a built-in sound card just for isolation between the radio and your sound card. So you can use a computer sound card if you put an interface in between that has a buffer, has proper buffers to protect the two. You might also have a radio without a sound card that is capable of being directly connected to a computer sound card system. So your radio will depend. These are some of the settings. These are radios that have built-in sound cards, and almost any new radio coming on the market has this. One of the few exceptions of new radios you can buy today is the Yaesu FT891, a favorite of POTA operators and other people, does not have a built-in sound card. I think the 718 is finally done. They were dragging this out forever. It doesn't have a sound card either. It was on sale forever. So these radios do not have built-in sound cards. You need a sound card interface. These radios do not have built-in sound cards, but you can hook them up to a sound card device directly. This is the K3S does have the built-in sound card, and the K4 have the built-in sound card. Now, I'm only looking at radios under 2,000 here too, so if your favorite radio is not on the list, that's because it's too much or it's too new. Now, if you want something really inexpensive, the QDX $69 radio plugs directly into the USB cable, has the built-in sound card, and you can do 2 watt or 5 watt FT8. No controls on it at all. It's just a little black box. Okay, here's some of the sound card interfaces. Probably the most common one people know about is the Signal Link. The one I currently recommend is the DigiRig. It's about a third or quarter the size. It's about half the price, and I think it works as well, if not better. MFJ had some, so you might find some of these used. I have 2 of them used that I'm selling at Hamfest if you're interested in one. And there's a number of other ones, so you can look at these. You can also use a little sound card on some radios. Just use a sound card. So if you have a KX2 or KX3, you could just use a little sound card like that. There's also a review from Jim Brown, K9YC, of different sound cards. You are going to need to set up other things though. So what I suggest is you do a search on the internet for setting up FT8 on your particular radio. Now this one I happened to write. Way back when the K3S first came out, I wrote a thing on how to hook it up. And notice I said for JT65, so that tells you how old that was. That was before FT8 even came out, but that works with FT8 also. So find your radio on the internet and make sure you change, because not only are you going to have to change some settings, you're going to have to change some settings on the radio, things such as filtering, turning off filtering, opening up the width, and things like that. Well beyond the scope of today, but I have a whole presentation on FT8 and FT4 that you can watch for more information on that. So if you're setting it up, if the radio has a built-in sound card, install the drivers first, hook up the cable, and you're pretty much done. It's going to give a new sound device on your computer, and the way you find that is you go in and you look at sound cards. Now this is something that's sort of annoying, but if I right click on my sound card here in Windows 10, I can go to this little sound setting. It'll come up here in a moment, and there it is. It's real nice. I have my playback devices and I have my recording devices. If you have Windows 11, it doesn't give you this choice when you click on the speaker. You need to go to the sound settings. In the sound settings, fortunately on Windows 11, if you scroll down, ignore everything at the top of it, and go down to the bottom where it says Sound Control Panel. And that will give you this little panel right here, which is what you want. Once you're in there, you'll see that there's devices installed by the radio. Here's my speakers K3. It did not say that. It said speaker something something other. I don't remember what it said. You can right click on these and you can go to the properties and you can rename it whatever you want it to be. So if you use multiple radios with FT8 and FT4 on one computer, name each of the sound devices so you can pick it out later on. They'll typically say something like codec or radio or whatever, but you can name them whatever you want them to be. You also need to make sure that they did not become the default device on your Windows. So you need to make sure your real speakers are still the default device. And here's my microphone for my K3. And I don't have it as the default device. Again, you don't want it to be the default device. There's a lot more on this on my FT8, FT4 presentation. But here's a little diagram showing you what I just talked about. And again, as I said earlier, once you do these two steps, you can run all these programs with ease. I'm going to skip over a little bit of this because I originally did this presentation for the Long Island CW group. So I talked a lot about interfacing for CW, and I'm not sure how many of you are interested in that, but I'm going to cover enough to get you started. So there's a number of different ways you can key your CW radio. You could actually use a key, you could use paddles, you could do all sorts of things. They don't require a computer at all. But you can use a computer to send CW, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But before we even get there, let's say you have memories on your computer, on your radio for CW. If you have a newer radio like the Yaesu 710, the ICOM 7300, they have a little 3.5 millimeter jack, and they have little accessories you can plug in. Those let you hit this button and it plays memory number 1 from the built-in keyer, whether it's a voice keyer or a CW keyer. This runs about 80 bucks. The good news, you can go to eBay and get this similar device for 15 bucks, or you can build it yourself for about 5 bucks. Because all these are is each button connects a resistor into the circuit. And this gives a an ohm reading to the radio, telling it what resistor it is, and that's how it chooses what it's doing. So all of these different interfaces, I have a presentation that I originally wrote for CQ Magazine on creating these type of interfaces. So you see they're just resistor matrices and switches. Here's the one that would work with the Kenwood 590. Here's the one for the IC 7300. And there's one in here also for the Yaesu somewhere in here. I think this is it at the beginning. It's right here. It uses a little more resistors. The only reason why there's multiple resistors in here is because they don't use standard values. They have to use standard value resistors, but the radio wants some weird value. I'm not sure why they did it that way, but that meant that they had to combine 2 resistors to get a unique non-standard resistance value when you push the buttons. But you can go out to eBay and you can find a third-party clone of this for $17. I was paying about $15. There's $14.24. I guess tariffs are hitting now. The prices have went up, but they work just fine. Now, let's say you want to use your radio to send CW. You basically, what you want to do is you want to key your radio from the computer. You can do a simple serial keying interface. It worked great with DOS for years. You can use something called a WinKeyer or WinKeyer emulation device. We'll talk more about what that means in a moment here. You can also generate CW as audio tones in the computer and then feed them in through the sound card. Don't do that. The reason why I suggest you don't do that is because you have to have your radio set in single sideband mode and you can't take advantage of the CW filters. So whoever's brilliant idea this was, FL Digi, you can change it and use a keying interface instead of sending the audio in. You can also, on some radios, the computer can send proprietary commands to the radio to tell it to key internally. So with my Elecraft K3, I can actually send it a code and it will key it in CW or RTTY by sending a code from the macro in N1MM. Here's some simple interfaces. They basically use resistors, diodes, and optoisolators or transistors. Here's a couple different ones. This is my favorite one to do. This actually has 2 optoisolators, but you don't need both of them. Here's another one. Here's one that adds an LED to it. These all work just fine. The problem is not with the interfaces, it's the way the operating systems now work. With DOS, these worked 100%. With Windows, no guarantee on whether it's going to work or not. Most of the time they work okay, sometimes they don't. They can get very funky. So what I suggest instead is using a WinKey device or a WinKey emulation device. K1EL has the WinKey devices themselves, and there are a bunch of different ones you can buy. Some of them let you use a set of paddles with it in addition to using with a computer. Some of them only let you use it with the computer. Oh, this you can still plug paddle in. This is the mini. This is the cheapest one, $59. You can plug this in. This is what I'm using with my K3, and I hook it up to a USB cable. It gives me a COM port number. I need to know what that is, and then I set that up in my software right here. By the way, you can click on those in Device Manager. You can click on those COM ports, and you can actually number them if you want to. So that's why I had this bizarre number 29 for my Win key, and that's the COM port it's actually on. And I need to set the DTR and RTS correct, and then I need to make sure that it says that's the Win using the Win key. And I have more information on this in this presentation. I'm not really going to go through because I'm not sure how many of you want to do CW keying. These are all other devices that work the same as Win keys. They typically say they're 99% compatible. K3NG, Anthony's, all of his series of keyer plans, he has an open source plan that a lot of people build into kits. Here's a number of the kits. Most of these are based on the K3NG stuff. This is one that I've used before. It's like you can buy this for $75. You'll find it for $150. Shop and go to I forget what the name of the company is off the top of my head, but I have a link to it right here. It's Electrosports. It's $75 including shipping, and everyone else wants $150 for it. This is one of the ones though that I had one of the USB mini micros break off the circuit board. And I'm going to skip through some of these. Okay. There's a video here on setting up the Yaesu FT710. Now, why do I have this? Because it's a very common radio. I think it performs very well for the price, and this just describes it. It's very similar to what you would do for other radios, but this is how to set it up to use it without any other type of device to be able to send the CW. And you can watch the video, but I have it narrowed down into step by step. So you press the function key on the front, you get into the CW settings, and then once you get there, you go to the PC keying and you change this from none to DTR. You hit the back button, and then you're ready to go. And then you need to go into the mode menu, scroll down to PC keying. I'm sorry, we just did that to DTR. Set the back button. You need to make one other change. You need to go and turn it on break-in on, and then hit the back button to get out of the menu. Then in N1MM, you configure it. You change the ports. You need to tell it that you want to key DTR. So that's the change you're going to make. You're going to tell it you want DTR to be the keying port and so forth, and it'll look like this. So you come in and configure it. You find the COM port that the radio's on. Remember, there's two COM ports. Use the non-enhanced COM port for keying it and use the enhanced port for controlling it. So we're using number 3 here to control the radio. We're using the second COM port to key the radio with. So by having two COM ports, we don't have a conflict. I can't do the same thing with my Aircraft K3 because I don't have two COM ports on it. I turn this so DTR is set to CW, RTS is turned off, okay, and it will work just fine. So that's how you can set it up. Okay, last thing, we're almost done. I keep talking about you can only use one software program per COM port. Well, Tom, VA2 FSQ has a little program. He started with one and now he has 4 programs. It's a software program that lets you feed one COM port into the software, and then it lets you create up to 5 fake COM ports. So right now I have one COM port on my Aircraft K3, but you notice that I can do N1MM, I can do my logging program, and I can do WSJTX all at the same time using the one COM port on the radio. Because I'm using one of Tom's programs, it's called Win for K3 Suite. So this program right here, I go in and I set it up to connect to the COM port that the radio's on. Happens to be 11. Once I do that, I'm connected here. I then go over to where it says third-party software, and I can set up fake COM ports and connect each one of them. Now to do that, I need to create a pair of COM ports for each one, and I just use 2 numbers next to each other. So the the fake Comm Port 19 pairs with Comm Port 18. Fake Comm Port 15 pairs with Comm Port 14. Fake Comm Port 16 and so forth. So these are all fake Comm ports. So I'm using Comm Port number 18 for my logging software. I'm using Comm Port number 14 for N1MM, and I'm using Comm Port number 17 for FT8 on WSJTX. Now he has one of these programs available for the for the K3, for the K4, also for most of the newer ICOMs, and also for most of the Yaesu radios. I forget what the price is. I think it's like 60 bucks. You do need one other piece of free software. It's called Comm because you need to create the fake ports that you're going to connect to. There's other software out there, virtual Comm Port software, VSPE. Most of these cost money, but the Comm is free. The problem with Comm is there's multiple versions and some versions don't work right. And it can be tricky. So I have a section here on how to set that up.
Max MG7M.
On how to do the Comm. This is what it looks like. You can also do it from command lines if you're really daring, but this is the graphical user interface for it. And you're going to have problems with it, so this is the video on how to fix those problems. And the first problem is you avoid is you always use version 2.2.2.0. Don't use newer versions. So if you're interested in the software, you can go out to Tom's site and you can click on any of these and it'll tell you you can download it and use it for 30 days for free. I'm not involved with anything. I'm just a satisfied customer. I actually have one of each of the three. But you can download it. You can use it for 30 days. After 30 days, you need to register it or it won't work anymore. The nice thing is if you're doing remote control of your radio via screen sharing from one room to another or across the world or whatever you're doing, you have this nice interface that I showed you earlier that you can control the radio. So I can come in here on this and I can change the band if I want to. And there it goes. I just changed the band. It caused everything else to jump because it saw the band changed. I can change the mode. I can even adjust volume levels and things like that. So that's the software from VA2 FSQ, the Comm, and that's the end of the program. So again, tiny.cc/radio-2-computer or shoot the QR code. I'll leave that up there and I'd be happy to try and answer questions. And as Dave said, he's been successful without using WinKeyer. It depends on your particular computer and what else you're doing on it. I have a fairly new computer, but I am very demanding on my computer. I usually have between 30 and 60 browser windows open at any given moment. In multiple versions of browsers. I usually have 3 browsers and open in multiple windows in each one. So let's see.
Question, do you want us to raise a hand or just?
Yes. Either raise a hand or put it into chat. I'm looking through the chat right now for questions real quick. There was a question from Sam about updating to Windows 11. I have not had to reload any drivers when I did it. I've only updated 3 computers. I haven't updated this particular one, but I've updated all my laptops this summer. And I have not had to, but I've heard about that. I think it's just as common that you run into problems just doing a Windows update as doing this a 10 to 11 change too. I have heard of that. Let's see. Yeah, as Dave says, you always want to plug into the same port, and that's why I find little stickers. I have a bunch of different little smiley faces. They're all different colors, so when I do stuff for field day, I always have a matching pair for each thing, for things like where the USB port plugs in, where the microphone plugs in, where the key plugs in, etc., etc. The Allen board AIO, I've seen this, but I have not worked with one. Let me just grab that real quick and I'll show you guys what it looks like. This is the AI zero.
Hello, hams and hams to be. Lucas WMBTR here. Using are going to be different. The purpose of this video is not to be a step-by-step for tough cables, and I'm just going to cut it.
But it's basically a universal interface that you can wire to use for different purposes. Take a look at it. It's AIOB. Yeah, here's to get to the sound control panel, Windows R, and then type in MMSYSCPL. So let's try that real quick. Oops, I pressed the wrong key. Yep, it worked that way. Yes, you'll be able to rewatch the video. It should be ready probably by Saturday, depending on when Dan gets rid of all my excess of chatting here to get it edited down. When you're the question is whether you should use the regular or the enhanced port. I would check the particular software and see which one they want. There's not a lot of consistency. Some programs don't care which one you're using, some do. And if you're having a problem, try switching to the other one. Let's see. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Do you use the regular enhanced for SST using MMS STV? That particular program doesn't tell you, so when I did use that, I switched around until I found one that worked, and I can't remember which one it was. Okay, so raise hands, and we'll go ahead and answer questions. I'm going to move this out of the chat out of the way so I can see all the hands that are here. I can't see all the hands. So Dan, if I don't see someone, let me know. Do we have any raised hands? I put everyone to sleep. That's the other reason why I have you turn your cameras on, so I can see how many of you are sleeping. No questions at all? I must have put everyone to sleep.
I have one.
Yes, go ahead, Todd.
I only have laptops, and most
Yeah.
of them don't have very many ports.
Yes.
So I use a hub, but I've always run into problems where there's like a delay that causes problems.
I've had that
Does
happen. I've had that happen also, and I've tried using different hubs, and I've seen different results from some of the hubs are better than others. But I have had one case where I had one thing that would not work through the hub, so I was able to, fortunately I had two ports on the laptop, and I was able to plug the one thing directly into the laptop and used everything else with the hub.
does that software that offer the fake ports, is that a workaround to that type of problem?
Well, that's not really what it's designed for, because usually when you have multiple things coming in, it doesn't work. This program takes one port and makes it into multiple ports. The problem you're having is you have multiple ports and want to make them and turn them into one USB. So it's different. Because like you probably have, you might have like your rig plugged in, and maybe you might have a wing keyer plugged in, and maybe you might have a mouse plugged in, and maybe you might have a keyboard plugged in, and so forth.
Yeah.
So I found that what I try and do is, in that case, when I'm prioritizing things through a hub, I connect the CAT connection directly to the laptop, and then I plug the mouse, the external keyboard, the win keyer, all that stuff through the USB hub.
Okay. That answers my question. Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions? Other things you want to see?
Okay, this is Jim K3YMI,
Yes.
and I turned on my video so you can see my confused look. I don't express things clearly, so I apologize. I have two questions.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say an ICOM 7300, you get two, when you plug it in, you get a USB for a COM port, and then you get a sound card input. When you use Win for ICOM 73, I take it you just use the COM port that you get, and then when you use a software program, it will see the other connection that you get with the K3.
Let me just explain one thing. The sound card and the control are both coming in on the same cat cable, but they're not the same. And the thing about the sound card is you can have multiple devices using the same sound card device at the same time. So I could be running a CW decoder, I could be running FT8, and I could be running an audio recorder, all from the same sound card stream.
Right.
As far as incoming goes, outgoing is a little bit different. But typically you don't have multiple devices that you're sending sound out to other than to the radio.
Okay.
So the sound card system doesn't really need to be, I mean, it's not a problem with sharing for that.
All right.
It's the control through the COM port that's the thing that's limited.
Second question, and I apologize for asking this, but I just got my 7300 repaired. So if I have my 7300 works, everything's fine. It can run WSTJX. Okay, now I have a Yaesu. I guess it's a 550, you know, it's a UHF, VHF, but it's got, and I have a DigiRig or Digi thingamajig.
Yes.
Now I want the cable, the device, well, I'm not getting things right, but to use the 7300, I use the, you know, the USB to whatever it is, ART cable. I mean, that device manager driver, whatever it is. Can I use that same one, do you think, with DigiRig?
Okay, here's the thing with the DigiRig and with all the other interfaces. They have to be configured for the way the ports on the radio are set up.
Correct.
On the 7300 though, you don't need the DigiRig.
No, that's correct. But
And on the other radio and the other one, so you can set it up for the other one. The thing about about those interfaces is they need to be configured internally with jumpers for different radios. Now, sometimes the same brand radios will use the same setup, but it's not guaranteed. So you have to make sure that you have the pins in the DigiRig set up to match the particular radio, because the jack on the back of it, even though the cables that you run to the radio are different, the jack still needs to be configured. The internal side needs to be configured for what cable you're using.
right, so let me be clear. I'm not going to run the 7300 and the Yaesu radio simultaneously.
Okay.
I'm just going to now run the Yaesu radio, and the DigiRig will be configured appropriately. But I'm wondering, do I need to and I'll use a different, well, maybe I won't use a different.
Let me see if this answers your question, because this is what I'm guessing might be part of your question. If you look at WSJTX here on my screen,
Yep.
you'll notice that there's something called configurations.
Correct.
So you want to set up a different configuration for each radio that you're using.
Got it.
So when you do that, when I change, okay, so right now I'm on the K3. So when you look at my settings here, we'll see the settings for the K3. You'll see the radio is the K3, COM 17, baud rate, etc. And it has the right audio stream, the right speaker and microphone. When I change this configuration to my 991, you'll see that now it'll restart the program. And it's going to tell me I can't find it because I don't have the 991 connected. But you'll see that when I look at my settings here, the radio is going to be the 991. It's on a different COM port, and it's using a different set of audio devices. Now, they're not being found because they're not connected right now. So what you need to do is, if you're going to use FT8 with multiple radios, you need to set up a configuration for each one. And the way you do that is you come up to configurations. If you only have one, and you say that you want to clone it. Once you've cloned it, you'll have a cloned one, and then go in and rename the clone one, and then change to the clone one and set up your settings for that radio. And I have information on that in my FT8, FT4 presentation, but is that what you're asking, how to set up to use the multiple radios?
No, I apologize, but that is a
Okay.
very good explanation. Basically, you said before you connect your radio up to your any cables, you want to make sure you've downloaded the appropriate
Drivers.
software driver.
Yes.
So I have the software driver for the 7300, and it's a standard USB thingamajig.
Yes.
I was just curious if you happen to know offhand whether that same software driver will work when I'm only plugging in the Yaesu radio and a different cable.
No, that you can have 20 different drivers on your computer, and
Correct.
they will not worry about each other because they will only work when you plug in the specific radio that they work with. So
Okay.
you want to have a different driver for every radio, and the computer will sort it out on its own. That is not a problem.
All right.
So you
So
should be okay on that.
definitely do not use the same driver for two different radios.
Yeah, and you don't actually you're responsible for installing it, but as far as initiating the COM port connection, it does it on its own.
Gotcha.
If it doesn't do it right, that's when you're going to have to go read Bob's thing on how to get rid of things and then reinstall it. And I have had that happen one time, and only one time, and I've probably done 300, 400 installations of configurations like this. I've only ever had it happen one time, and what I had to do, and it turned out that I found out later, the person had plugged the USB cable in before we installed the drivers.
Gotcha.
And
Yes,
we didn't realize that. But yeah, so yes, that's exactly what happened. And what I basically had to do is I had to go in and remove every driver off the computer. And once I removed every driver that was there, I reinstalled the right ones and everything worked.
Yeah, the reason I'm having these confusions because I was originally using virtual VM under a Mac.
Yeah,
I do it my hand and just on a PC. All right, thank you very much.
you're welcome. Okay, let's see. Yeah, Ham Radio Deluxe and WSJTX. Actually, almost every program I use has multiple configurations. The one thing that does not is N1MM. So what you need to do in N1MM is get in the habit of leaving things behind, but taking the COM port away. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Because again, I'm a person that has lots of radios, so I'm switching radios. So you see that I have my K3 here, and I actually have it in twice. But if I leave, let's say I have my 710 on here, so I come down here and I set up my Yaesu 710. You know, they're under FT. So if I set that up and set up everything for it, I'm just going to pick a COM port right now. That's not going to work, but that's okay. Set everything up so I have it all set up right and make all the changes I need to make and so forth. When I'm done, as long as I come over here and make changes back to none on the COM port, that won't be active. So I can leave, if I had, let's see, 8 radios, I could have 8 radios configured here. As long as I don't have a COM port listed for it, it won't be active. But the settings will stay there. So if you're switching radios often on N1MM, just get in the habit of just taking the COM port away. And you can write it down so you know where it is. You can make a note for yourself somewhere, but just as long as you don't have a COM port listed, it won't be active. 2 other things about N1MM though. When you make a change, you got to restart it and then restart it a second time, or it's still going to say that the COM port isn't there. Because it's looking for COM ports. If I remove a COM port right now, if I take COM port 14 away and change it to COM port 12, it's going to start up and say, we couldn't, COM port 14's busy, or something like that. So yeah, just get in the habit you need to restart it. Also, be aware that when you first install N1MM, you need to restart your computer at least once before you can configure it, or it won't configure right. It'll give you all sorts of errors. Once you restart it once, it's fine. You can also hit the cancel button not to do anything, but yeah, you can have as many things configured in N1MM as you want, just as long as you don't have a COM port listed for it. Other questions? Oh, if you want the chat archive, we typically get them. We typically download them, but to make sure, go up to the chat and click on the three dots in the upper right-hand corner and go to Save Chat before we shut down tonight. Dan usually saves the chat, but just in case, that way you have it. Now, I know we went a little bit over, but that's because Dan couldn't stop me from. And my wife kept asking me, "What are you doing?" Because I was rewriting this presentation. She kept, "What in the world are you talking about tonight that you're spending so much time on it?" And I said, "It's going to be complicated." Any other questions? I said some. Okay. I think that I answered all the questions. If there's no other questions, we don't have a topic for next week yet, but we will have something posted fairly soon for next week, hopefully. It might be as late as next Tuesday, but hopefully we'll be back on regular schedule every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. And again, if you have something that you'd like to see us do, get in contact with us. We'd love to hear from you. Mark has a question, I think.
How are you?
Mark, N3 RDV. Mark, your hand is up. Do you have a question? You're still muted.
How
There
are
you go.
you?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm using J, JTX with JTT alert,
Yes.
and somewhere in between there, I'm not sure where, but I
I know.
know it's an option
Let me show you
that
where.
that one of those apps can send me a sound alert, like if it's a dupe or a new station or call that's on my
Yes.
wanted call list. Um, I'm not hearing them. Is that, and I don't want to mess with the sign card in the 7300 because I got it where I can write. But I'm assuming that I'm not hearing the audio from my desktop because my default sign is not Windows.
Okay. Yeah, you want the default sound to be on a real speaker.
Okay.
Yeah. And I thought you were going to ask me another question, so let me just mention this real quick. Some of the interfacing does not use COM ports. It uses UDP and other types of network communication. And this number here for the the UDP port has to match the number that JT Alert's using. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter which number it is, but it has to be the matching port number. So if you have a case where the two are not talking to each other, it's probably the UDP.
Oh, that side's working great. It's just
Okay.
that I see all these options to sound an alert and all this stuff, and I'm not hearing anything.
Yeah, my alerts were silenced by my wife. She said that you can't leave that on. I'll kill you. It was basically, yeah. When I operate FT8, FT4, I'm not allowed to have any audio on, and I'm not allowed to have any alerts on. The
Um,
first time she heard an alert, she went ballistic. So yes, she loves when I do FT8 because it's quiet. So she thinks that part just ruins the whole idea of it being quiet. So CW, I always wear headphones, and I'm using a key so she doesn't hear that. And of course, on phone, she hears me yelling, so she prefers CW contest by far on the weekend.
what do you recommend for CW on a 7300? How do you?
I'm not done a lot on the 7300, but I would probably use one of the Win keyers if I was going to send information between N1MM and use it to key it with.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You might be able to get away with one of the small interfaces that I showed before, but either that or I would use the WinKeyer.
All right. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Anything else? Okay,
Anybody
someone's
please raise their hand.
yes. Go ahead, Johnny.
Just wanted to thank you for your time this evening. Very informative here. I've been at tech most of my life and did a fantastic job. So thank you very much, sir.
Well, you're very welcome. And let me just share one other thing with you. At the end of the presentation, I didn't get a chance to go to it. There's a whole link with other presentations from me. So in addition to the 500 videos from RATPAC that we have available at our YouTube site, there's also another 30 or 40 available of my presentations. So if you're interested in any of these, I don't record them myself. These are recorded when I present at other places, but there's a bunch of information of different types.
Can you put that link back up?
Yes.
There? Thank you.
Well, I just realized this is Jim K3YMI. Not only am I not clear in my presentations, but when I turn on my video, I have my pajamas on. Because I had to be ready because we got to get up early tomorrow.
Well, that's the nice thing about being retired. Although I have class tomorrow, so I do have to get up by at least 8.
Right. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Yeah, we had a lot of East Coast today, Dan. So it was all late
Yeah,
people.
we had pretty good turnout. I think 78 was topped there. About a half hour into the show, we lost about 4 or 5, and then farther into the show, we started dropping out fairly quickly.
We still have 25. I could talk for another hour and a half. I could probably get rid of half of them.
Okay.
My wife's chuckling in the background saying, "Yes, he will."
She's a keeper.
Yes, he is.
Okay.
It's always fun when we present. We used to present together at technology conferences, and she said we'd had good presenter, bad presenter, like good cop, bad cop, and she would kick me onto the podium sometimes too when she didn't like what I was doing. She also didn't like the fact that I'd add slides as we were walking up to do the presentation. I'd be adding slides to the presentation.
All
Okay.
right.
Well, Dan, you can cut some of this. You can chop me down a little bit and try and get it under an hour and 15 minutes, and we'll have it posted probably by Saturday. Again, if you haven't seen the video on what RATPAC is, if you're new to this, if you saw us via Facebook, you might want to consider joining the Groups.io so you get email messages. If you are on Groups.io, you may want to follow us on any of the other social media, Facebook, Instagram, Mastodon, X, maybe something else I'm forgetting, but YouTube. You can follow us on YouTube so you get notified when we post our new videos.
Okay. Well, unless somebody's got some more here that want to say or something to offer, I think we ought to close her down.
Make sure you get all
What?
the interfacing done so you can be on the RIDI contest 1 week from this weekend.
Right. All right. I'm going to say 73s, everyone, and I'll see you next week.